Hi, it's Cedric Bailey. Welcome another edition of the Slice Report. And joining us from our nation's capital of Washington, D.C., it's Mona Austin. Hey, Mona, happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday, Cedric. Happy Friday, everyone. From the nation's capital, Jim Clyburn of South Carolina led his committee into questioning two top experts on the coronavirus response Friday morning. Clyburn wanted to know, why is it that in Europe, their numbers have gone down, and in America, we are still at a high level of emergency health? And he said that it was because of the delayed response and the reaction from the president. Anthony Fauci says he believes, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who of course is head of infectious disease in our nation, he said that he believes that our response was slow, and that's why those numbers, there's a great difference between the numbers. Now, Clyburn started this meeting reminding everyone that they have to wear their mask. Every lawmaker in the room had to have on their mask at all times if they were not speaking. This comes from a mandate from Nancy Pelosi, who issued the mandate earlier this week. And then just on Thursday, yesterday, Herman Cain, the Republican who ran for president on the conservative ticket, who was an executive officer over Papa John's Pizza, a business executive, and a Trump supporter, passed away at the age of 74. He was seen a few weeks before his diagnosis with coronavirus at a Trump Tulsa rally without a mask. And so what we saw this morning is very important for people who are in politics, who are interfacing with the public, because honestly, many of them are in the age range of those who are at high risk, Cedric.
That's right. It's amazing that you had brought that up because I saw that report on CNN last night. I was checking out Chris Cuomo, and he was discussing that too as well. And he had the guy that represents Trump steady talking, and they was talking about how great a job. And Chris was just like, man, I don't know what level and what you're coming from, but I need you to kind of break this down a little bit. And I thought it was very interesting. Now, earlier during the week, Mona, we also saw that another person who was from Texas who supported Trump campaign was on Congress who refused to wear the mask. He came down with it.
Absolutely. And that is, it seems to be what's beginning to happen in the upper ranks of people who are close to the president. We know that staffers got coronavirus, but we are now seeing people who are in higher ranks. And so the question is, how often is the president getting tested, and has he been exposed directly? And every time us in the media at the White House ask this question, we are getting the answer that the president is tested frequently. Last week, there was a contradiction, however, with the press secretary saying she believes he gets tested a few times a day. And then the president actually says he gets tested a couple times a week, but the people who had corona in his orbit were not directly close to him. And so he still insists that he is fine, and he is still pushing the drug hydrochloroquine. That was also a piece of news that came out this week. Hydrochloroquine, as you know, is the anti-malaria drug that President Trump continues to push despite the experts, the FDA, our highest authority on medicine in this country, saying that hydrochloroquine does not work. And the person that you were referring to who was on with Chris Cuomo last night, Cedric, he is the owner and president of Newsmax. He's a conservative who also believes that Anthony Fauci is misleading the American people because he has changed the narrative on coronavirus. And the reason for that is because the information gathering is evolving. The more Anthony Fauci gets new information, he is warning the public that there are changes. So we've gone from not needing to wear a mask to absolutely needing to wear a mask, to a hope that there would be a vaccine by the end of the year, to now him being able to say there is a very strong chance that there will be a vaccine by the end of this year, and that it will gradually be available to all American citizens, Cedric.
Well, definitely it has messed up everything from the sports world. It's I do what I say, not what I do, and it's just incredible. We know that the NBA starts their basketball season now, and the WNBA started last week, Major League Baseball. They were able to get their start last week too as well. They've had a few hiccups here because we got the reports about the Miami Marlins and staff, 14 to 17 people coming down with it, and it's kind of caused a delay. We do know that the NFL is not going to be able to have any exhibition preseason games now. They're going to try to kick it off with the regular season, and it's been just interesting or so to see what's happening.
Yes.
A lot of college football has been impacted. Now, I just got my message the other day that the USC Alabama game, the Advocare game that takes place at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, is not going to be taking place. So I don't know what they're doing up there as far as making decisions, but I can just say that it has impacted the sports world. It's impacted our kids and going to school. And what's happening with your kids in your school there? Because here in Oklahoma, we're looking at our kids.
What's happening across the board in education, Cedric, for those kids getting ready to go back to college, high school, junior high school, middle school, and elementary school, is that their extracurricular activities have absolutely been impacted. Many colleges are not starting their sports program, and same thing for high schools. Here in Virginia, the state of Virginia is mandating that all activities are canceled at least through the middle of December. And the reason they are doing that is they want to get a handle on what's coming down from the national guidelines. And so here in this state, no one is going to be able to do any extracurricular activities. On the college level, at the College of William and Mary here in Virginia, all extracurricular activities, fraternal and sorority-oriented activities, they have been canceled. If you try to have parties, for example, or meetings of large groups of people, you will be penalized with the potential of suspension. And so some colleges are practicing the same rules, and others are figuring it out a different way. But like you're saying, from the very top, it's do as we say, not do as we do. But unfortunately, the president had to change his tone on this. And I guess we can say fortunately as well, he had to change his tone because he knew Herman Cain was a direct supporter. He called Herman Cain a friend. And so yesterday in the press conference, he did encourage everyone to wear their mask and practice social distancing and be mindful of the elderly in their communities and in their families. And so perhaps, as I saw on TBN watching two younger hosts last night on TBN, one of them said that the president is now saying it's going to get worse before it gets better. And if he is saying that, that means it's going to get worse. So maybe many of the conservatives, people who have politicized this issue, the issue of wearing masks, who knew that that was political. It isn't. But for those who have politicized this issue, they perhaps are now hearing from those around them that this is a serious issue, and that Jim Clyburn said that the president has downplayed this from the start. And instead of taking control as a leader, he gave the responsibility to the private sector and governors of each state. And that might be why we are in this coronavirus quandary right now. The other headline coming out of this week, as we segue, is the passing of a father of the civil rights movement, Representative John Lewis. Want to point out that civil rights itself is the making of the African-American community coming out of the 1960s. It had an impact, the civil rights movement had an impact around the entire globe, and we have people like John Lewis to thank for that. President Barack Obama, who eulogized Lewis yesterday, reminded the world that it is our responsibility to make good trouble, as Lewis would want us all to. And his politically potent message was about voting, Cedric. As you probably have heard by now, the president is looking to delay the 2020 presidential election.
And you know what? Joe Biden said he was going to do that. You know, he said he was going to do that.
Biden prophesied it. He did. He did say that the president was going to try to do this as a trick to confuse everyone and to discourage people from going to the polls. And President Trump said that the reason he wants to do it is not because he doesn't want people to go to the polls, but because he does not want to have botched results. As you know, we have had botched results. And he pointed to a news article from the Washington Post that talked about having delayed results in our elections in the past, and the potential for that now. As you will recall, during these primaries before coronavirus hit, there were some skirmishes at polls. Democrats had to figure out how they were going to handle these polls in various states, poll results in various states, because there were issues. And so the president is saying, I'm not saying this blindly, I'm not saying this selfishly, I'm saying that we could all have some issues with this, and we need to make sure that these issues are worked out before we go to the polls. He said he does not have a problem with absentee voting, which was a part of why congressional leaders even held up the stop sign and said, wait, you cannot just stop an election. You cannot just change the rules. But he said he doesn't necessarily want to just stop the election. He wants the system to be cleaned up before we go into it. And then on the back end, we can't call a true winner.
Gotcha. Hey, I want to go back to something you mentioned about the service with John Lewis, the congressman. And I want to commend the people of Atlanta, the fine job. But, you know, did you notice how everybody was all spread out there in the church? Everybody had their mask on, how they followed protocol. When they got up to the podium, they took their masks off, they spoke, and then they were able to put their masks on. And that was the perfect setting or so. So I want to encourage people, if you're going to do something, try to do it like 50 people or less. Do not go in there with a lot of people. And that church was big enough and perfect. And I want to say something. Bernice King, not only did you look good, but you sounded good, and she had a message too as well. What did you get from her message about honoring the late Congressman John Lewis?
It was right on point. It's important to honor those whose shoulders we stand upon, and we certainly each stand upon the shoulders of John Lewis. He was the embodiment of her father's message of peaceful protesting. He was the embodiment of Christ's love. What I thought was important to note in that service is, in addition to the social distancing that was going on, but the arc of it for me was that all of those presidents, this was a man who lived a life so honorable that all of the living presidents, except for Jimmy Carter, who could not be there because he was ill, all of them were there, and they represented themselves with civility and respect. Bill Clinton was clearly moved by being in that service, and he was sincere in how he felt about John Lewis. Everyone who spoke of John Lewis had a personal story. We all got a history lesson and a civics lesson from everyone who spoke too, Cedric, but they each could tell a personal story about him. And that speaks to the character of a man who was openly Christian. And the world got to see what it meant to respect a saint of God. That meant a lot to me watching it. And then to hear Zenona Clayton talk about him and how he met his wife. That was very refreshing, because these are things that we would otherwise not know about John Lewis. But what we do remember him for is having the voice of a roaring lion, but being a gentleman. And I'm not going to make a supposition here. And it's not that he could not defend himself, but he chose a more gentler way. And I believe that the politicians of today need to understand the civility in that philosophy, Cedric.
And by the way, I want to also commend the mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Bottoms. Is that her name? Lance Bottoms?
Keisha Lance Bottoms, yes.
She was phenomenal. And I even have to commend the governor, Kemp, for what he had to say. It was great to see the leaders of that state come there and put aside their personal differences to talk about the legend himself. And I want to commend her. And I like what CBS did. So kudos to Gail and Michelle. And even I saw Nora O'Donnell on there with their reports and talking about everything. So hats off to CBS News for doing a fine job with the coverage of them. But I like the moment. There were two moments I liked the most this week. The rotunda scene with all the congressmen there, and they had their masks on, and how they marched around and did what they had to do.
And they laid their hands on his casket that was draped in the American flag for his service to our nation. And he was not just a servant to African Americans, he was a servant to the nation. And for those who walked with him, who are still with us, Al Sharpton, for example, he pointed out how disrespectful President Trump was for mentioning his work to better the lives of African Americans concerning housing, when that was debasing to the legacy of John Lewis is what Sharpton pointed out. He said that it was an insult because that is precisely the type of work that John Lewis had worked for. And so we do still have some of his contemporaries here, and they continue to keep their hand to that plow and fight for voting rights. And now, as of today, Cedric, as you know, we are close to, I believe we're 92 days out until the election, and Vote with Authority has begun again. We want all churches to get involved in organizing, get out the vote and souls to the polls effort so that everybody does participate in our democratic process here in this nation. I'm sorry?
You have the link that they can go to the website. Have you posted it yet?
Vote with Authority is on Facebook. You can go to that page and just click like on that page. That's where information will be posted. And of course, during these reports, we will remind everybody of the changes that are going on to voting in this country. As of right now, since we are reporting on it in this moment, I want to be clear. The election is on. Mitch McConnell came out. Several Republicans came out and said the president does not have the constitutional right to change the date of an election. It's simply against the rules. And so, yes, so we are committed to that November 3rd date. So prepare your people and your community to go out and vote. It's our precious right, a right that John Lewis fought for. I want to reiterate something or emphasize something, Cedric, along the lines of our children going back to school. Very important information. Dr. Redfield from the CDC, he was on to this morning, and one of the things that he said is that this is a public health versus public health issue for children. He is a proponent of reopening schools, and one of the primary reasons is that there are children with mental health issues, children who are being abused, and their only protection is the school system. The only help they get is the school system. And we have to think about children who are on the free lunch programs and who may not be getting a healthy meal on a regular basis as a result of the shutdown. So he is saying that it is important to the future of the nation, but even in this present moment, to get children back in school because there are safeguards for them and the support that they need. And there may be people listening to us who can identify with this status and identify with the difficulty of having a job that may not allow them to have flexibility while they try to take care of their children and having childcare issues. And so that's what's holding up the process of reopening for some areas. And Redfield says that he does support the idea of getting back and that he was a part of that decisioning. The head of the CDC was a part of the decisioning and the guidelines that President Trump rolled out. And then I also want to end, Cedric, by talking about the potency in the speech of the former president of the United States, the 44th, and that is President Barack Obama, confusing him with Keisha Lance Bottoms. We're recognizing a lot of leaders today. But President Barack Obama, the 44th president of the United States, when he was inaugurated and he embraced John Lewis twice, he said, "I'm here because of you." Yeah. And yesterday he came out fighting for Lewis's legacy. It was not an ordinary eulogy. Yeah. His entire word for word eulogy speech is at newslice.blogspot.com, and I encourage anyone to go there. And I want the last words you hear from me today to be from President Barack Obama, because it is a speech for the record books. And the thing that I want you to recall is what he said to all of us. He said that John Lewis would want all of us to follow in his footsteps, but he also said that he would want politicians to follow in his footsteps as well. And I think the part that he really was emphasizing is the way we conduct ourselves. Our nation is looking for healing.
Yes.
And he believes that Biden will be the healer in chief, the person who will not stoke the racial tension in the country or the partisanship that is keeping us divided. This is not to promote either side. As you know, I'm a straight up reporter, but it is important that we understand what we saw yesterday is a reflection of the spirit of Representative John Lewis of Georgia. I'm Mona Austin. You've been listening to the Slice Report on the Cedric Bailey Radio Show.
Thank you so much, Mona, and to all of our fans that's following us. And by the way, how can they reach out to you and follow you on social media, Mona, and on Instagram and on Twitter?
TheSliceReport.com, at The Slice Daily, and also at thenewslice.blogspot.com, and of course on Facebook at Mona King Austin, and Twitter at I am Mona Austin.
Thank you so much, everybody. Go out and vote.
Thanks, Cedric.